Is backpacking dangerous? My name is Dan, and what I'm going to do in this video is dive into the actual numbers surrounding backpacking safety, in the hopes that at the end of it, we will actually definitively be able to answer whether or not backpacking is dangerous. I'm also going to debunk a few of the common danger myths surrounding hiking, as well as talk about a few ways that you can be safe while on the trail. Alright, well let's dive into the numbers, and what we're going to look at first is hiking-related fatalities. Now, this data is actually kind of difficult to find, mostly because people hike in many different locations. National parks, national forests, state forests, county forest preserves. So you have all these different agencies, and there's no central location of all hiking-related deaths. So in order to answer this question, we need to get a little more specific. So what we're going to look at are fatalities specifically in national parks between 2005 and 2014. So between that time period, 2005 to 2014, about 120 to 140 people die every year on average in national parks, not including suicides. Now you might be thinking, holy crap, 140 people every year! Well, you do need to put that in context of how many people actually visit national parks, which on average is about 280 million people every single year. So, in other words, your odds of dying in a national park are about 1 in 2 million. 1 in 2 million. But many of those 280 million people don't ever go hiking. So we have to get a little more granular and try to find the number of actual hikers. Now, doing so is remarkably difficult, but I did happen to find a study from 2002 that estimates the number of hikers in the US every year at about 24 million. So if we combine 24 million hikers with 140 fatalities per year, then your odds of dying while hiking in a national park are about 1 in 185,000. That's certainly more likely than 1 in 2 million, but 1 in 185,000 is still very, very unlikely to happen. Just as comparison, you are more likely to die from dog attacks, legal execution, air and space transport, being a pedestrian, and of course, car crashes. Now, if there are any statisticians watching, I'm sure you're rolling your eyes at this point, because I totally understand that using this 24 million number of hikers is not a perfect number, because it is representative of the entire country in any type of a hiking setting, not just national parks. But nevertheless, it does at least get us in the ballpark of what the odds are of dying while hiking. Now we can get an even better picture if we take a look at the most common causes of dying in a national park. The top 3 are drowning, vehicle accidents, and falling. But I think you would agree that those 3 things, drowning, car crashes, and falling, are not things that most hikers commonly worry about. Maybe falling a little bit, depending on where you're hiking, but certainly not car crashes and drowning. By the way, whenever I go on a solo trip, I always tell my wife that don't worry, I am way more likely to die in the car on the way to the trailhead than actually on the trail. Although for some reason that never seems to comfort her. And if you look at that chart again, the more common things that we are worried about, like wildlife and freezing to death, are really, really far down there, and they just don't happen often. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, yeah, obviously dying is the worst possible thing that can happen on the trail, but what about other emergencies, like getting seriously injured or getting lost? Well, that data is even more difficult to come across, but we can look at search and rescue numbers. So in 2014, 3,409 people required search and rescues in national parks. And using that same 24 million overall hiker number, your odds of needing a search and rescue while in a national park are about 1 in 7,040, which is just about the same odds as dying in a plane crash. Now, the most common areas for needing a search and rescue are mountains at 35% and canyons at 15%. Not a huge surprise there. The most common activities needing a search and rescue are day hiking at a whopping 42% and overnight hiking or backpacking at 13%. This also isn't too surprising given that there are a lot more day hikers out there than backpackers. And lastly, the most common factors leading to needing a search and rescue are fatigue or just the person's overall physical condition at 23%, and then a lack of information or poor judgment at 19%. So think about that for a second. Over 40% of search and rescues are the result of people either doing more than what their body can actually do or exhibiting bad judgment. Okay, but what about some of the things that hikers are commonly afraid of? Well, let's talk about a few of the most popular danger myths while hiking. Well, there is perhaps no greater hiking danger myth than wildlife. And top among those has to be bears. But if we look at the numbers for bear fatalities, it will show that it just doesn't happen often. Over the last 20 years, from 1997 through 2017, there have only been 25 deaths from black bears in the US, or about 1.25 every year. As a comparison, dogs kill about 25 people every single year. So I think you would agree that 1.25 people out of 24 million is just a very, very small odd. A similar story exists for other wildlife fears, such as snakes. There are about 7,000 to 8,000 venomous snake bites in the US every year, but only about 5 people actually die. And there's a similar story for poisonous spiders. About 6 people on average in the US die every year from poisonous spider bites. But there can be many, many years go by without a single death from a spider bite. As a fun fact, even one of the most toxic spiders in the world, the Australian funnel web spider, has not yet recorded a single death as of 2014. So what about another really big hiking danger myth? Other people. I have heard countless times how people are afraid of getting murdered by someone while on the trail. And I generally understand this because I have had the same fear myself, especially when I'm solo backpacking. If we take a look at the deadliest national park for homicides, which is Lake Mead, by the way, then we'll find that there have only been 6 homicides in the last 10 years. I don't know about you, but we would be jumping for joy at having that statistic here in Chicago. So you are much more likely to probably die in your own town than on the trail. So with all these numbers in hand, I think we can finally say that hiking and backpacking are relatively safe activities. Now, of course, that's not trying to cast aside the fact that yes, sadly, hundreds of people have lost their lives while on the trail. As well as the fact that yes, even though hiking is a relatively safe activity, you do still need to take certain precautions in order to be safe. And while I can go through every single hiking danger and how to be prepared for each of those while on the trail, that's really a whole other video. So what I can say though is that all hiking safety boils down to really 3 main factors: being prepared, being educated, and using good judgment. When it comes to being prepared, yes, you obviously need to bring the right gear with you, including always bringing the 10 essentials with you on every hike and backpacking trip, as well as any kind of specific gear that you need for that one trip. But it also includes being prepared by looking at things like the weather and knowing what that is before you leave, as well as leaving a hiking itinerary with someone back home, so if something does go wrong, they know when to contact the authorities. Being educated is obviously important because knowledge is power, and you need to be able to know how to do certain things to be safe on the trail. So knowing how to be bear safe with your food, or first aid while on the trail, or any type of really specialized stuff. Like for example, I know practically nothing about avalanches, but if I ever find myself in an area that's prone to having avalanches, then yeah, you bet that I'm going to read up on that topic. Or even better, with anything about education, get some actual expert training. And lastly, using good judgment is really part common sense and part being honest with yourself. which can be easier said than done, especially if you're the type that is really self-competitive and you like challenges when you're on the trail. I get like that myself sometimes when I'm on the trail, and I'm especially super optimistic when it comes to just about any challenge. So sometimes I can put myself in a situation that is really a little more dangerous than what I should have taken on. So you do have to be honest with yourself about your abilities, your skill level, and what you can actually take on when you're out backpacking. And finally, as a bonus, a couple of extra specific precautions you can take to be safe on the trail. Number one, hike in groups. Now, I'm not going to tell you never to go solo hiking. I'd be very, very hypocritical if I did that, since I go on a lot of solo trips myself. But going with other people is undoubtedly safer than going by yourself. So if you are really concerned about backpacking safety, then you might want to think about only hiking with another person or in groups. Also, bring some type of a GPS with you, either a dedicated unit like a Garmin, or download some type of an app on your phone like Gaia GPS. That way, if you do get a little lost or you're not quite sure which way to go, you have some type of a GPS with you so you can see yourself on a map. And along the same lines, if it's in your budget, also bring some type of a satellite messenger with you, such as one of the Spot devices or one of the Garmin InReaches, something that you can communicate with to the outside world, as well as sending an SOS message if and when you actually do need to have a search and rescue. Well, I hope this was helpful, and I would love to hear whether or not you agree that backpacking is a relatively safe activity. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. As always, stick around another minute for a few bloopers. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and have fun out there. And definitively answer whether... Sure, you're rolling your eyes. Man, why is this so hard? So many numbers on here. Oh, should I disclose that I'm actually bad at math? That's not right. How many times can I say safe?
Get back here. Danger is my middle name.
Let's start over.